Walk with me through the halls of the Comic Kingdom. Huge acquisition of Golden Age comics. I recently acquired a huge lot of comics. The vast majority of them are from the Golden Age or very early Silver Age. I'm so excited about them that I'd like to share them with you. I'm a collector, so I plan on keeping these, but if you see a comic that you just can't live without, contact me. We'll talk. Most of these comics are of the funny animal sort, including Disney and Looney Tunes. There are some comic strip based comics like Dennis the Menace and Little Lulu. I also got some more comics from publishers like Charlton and DC. It's amazing to me that in such a huge lot, there were no duplicates, and I didn't have any of them in my already massive collection. I'll start with the Looney Tunes comics. Of course, you got Bugs Bunny, because he's the most popular character, and I think he's the most popular character just because he can do everything. He can imitate anybody, he has endless talents. I mean, he's the most workable character. You can put him in any situation. You can only do so many things with Daffy Duck or Foghorn Leghorn or Speedy Gonzales or any of the others. So I think Bugs Bunny is kind of universal for that reason. Daffy Duck, which, funny enough, on the cover, it was really just called Daffy, and then later on, they put out his full name. And then, of course, there's their flagship title, the Looney Tunes, which was originally called Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies Comics, but eventually they just dropped the Merry Melodies and it just became Looney Tunes. By the way, I love the Elmer Fudd character. He gets picked on a lot. There's a lot of people that like to say that they don't like Elmer Fudd or, you know, but I just think he's just kind of a fun character. He says most of the time, he's not the troublemaker in all this. It's usually Bugs Bunny that kind of provokes him or somebody else that kind of provokes him. I think by himself, he's sort of a mild-mannered, laid-back kind of guy. But he gets abused, but I don't think he minds it too much. Mostly because he's stupid. I noticed that they put Elmer with Bugs Bunny a lot on the covers of the Looney Tunes comics. And I think that's because he's just a little bit more friendly than Yosemite Sam. Yosemite Sam is such an irritable character. He's funny, but you can't have too much fun with him, if you know what I mean, because he's always guns a-blazing, or he's after him with the sword or whatever. Elmer makes the perfect foil. I only got one Porky Pig out of all this. I love Porky Pig. He's a great character, and I love his comics, but I only got one in this lot. And last but certainly not least, Tweety and Sylvester. Those cartoons never get old. Before I get into the Disney comics, I wanted to show you this. In this whole lot, I got only one Harvey comic, a Baby Huey. I love Baby Huey and the Harvey publisher in general, but it's been hard for me to find a lot of classic Harvey comics in my trails. I don't know why this would be, as they were a major publisher in the Golden and Silver Ages. Even in the 70s and 80s and early 90s when I was growing up, you know, Harvey was still a huge publisher until they went completely defunct. So I don't know why it's always so hard to find these out and about. Now on to the Disney comics. Most of these are from Dell. The first two I'm going to show you are from the Dell 4-color series. This is a peculiar series, as it never says Dell 4-color anywhere on the cover or on the inside, but that is indeed what the series is called. Every issue is unto itself. Sometimes the idea worked and it was spun off into a series. Sometimes it became a one-shot. This one is Daisy Duck's Diary. I have always loved Daisy Duck, but I think she's an incredibly underused character, even today. The second Disney comic I have from the Dell 4-color series is Vacation in Disneyland. Mickey Mouse comics are cool, and I have a lot of them, but I didn't get much in the way of Mickey in this lot, outside of the Walt Disney's Comics and Stories issues. For some reason or another, Donald Duck was the featured character on almost every cover of this series while Dell was publishing it from 1940 to 1962. When Gold Key took over the title in 1962, they started featuring many other characters on the cover, including Mickey Mouse. As far as the comics themselves went, Mickey was always inside, along with Donald and all the major characters. There were also regular features for great characters that you really didn't see in cartoons, like Little Bad Wolf, Grandma Duck, and so many others. I love these covers because Donald's bad temper and easily flustered nature always made for good cover opportunities. One of those a picture says 1,000 words kind of deal. One thing I do hate, however, is when I come across comics and somebody does little sketchings on there. They draw in the eyes or they make little devil faces on them or whatever. Because I am a collector and I love comics for the comics themselves, it's not going to make me want to, you know, just get rid of it or throw it away or anything else. It's not worthless to me, but I really do hate it when people do that. Don't do that. By the mid-1950s, Walt Disney's Comics and Stories was the best-selling comic in the United States with a monthly circulation of over 3 million copies. But since people couldn't get enough of Disney comics back then, there were many other series. Donald Duck had his own successful series, And I got a lot of them in this lot too coming up. This one's tattered for sure, but I still love it. Why is it that Mexican Donald, whenever he's wearing a sombrero, is always extremely funny, whether it's in cartoons, comics, artwork, wherever you see it? I don't know why. It just seems funny to me. Huey, Dewey, and Louie were often shown with Donald on comic book covers. They were such well-received characters that many cartoon and comic characters had their versions of nephews. Remember Popeye's annoying nephews from the cartoons? Or what about Woody Woodpecker's niece and nephew, Splinter and Knothead? Donald's nephews were highly influential in the world of funny cartoons. Once again, another sabotage comic book cover where they put on little fangs and little devil mustache and they draw on the eyes. This is, I hate that. What a sacrilege. That's right up there with ripping a comic book in half or something. This is, terrible. And now on to the Donald Ducks. Mickey Mouse is always the flagship character for Disney. But seriously, when it comes to Disney comics, Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge, any of the Duck stars, I think they pretty much dominated the comic book medium. For whatever reason, I think they just really registered with most readers. Now, I love the Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comics too, but I really enjoy Mickey Mouse, I enjoy Goofy, I enjoy any of those Disney characters. You gotta hand it to them. Some of the sight gags that they use for the covers are really, really clever. Like a baseball flying into Donald's sleeve. Here it says, that's pretty cute. I mean, who thinks of this? Did something like this actually happen to somebody? Where did they get this from? This, of course, okay, with the dog leash. That's happened to me. I don't know if it's happened to anybody else out there, but I've gotten tangled up with a dog leash when they want to run around you. They're looking for something or chasing after something, and this happens. That kind of thing has happened to me. Not exactly this thing. I've never had a cat on top of my head, but you know what I mean. And Daisy. You can never get enough Daisy. Daisy's a little rough on Donald. She's rougher on Donald than Minnie is on Mickey. That's more like a real relationship right there. Usually, when you find a bunch of Disney comics anywhere, Uncle Scrooge comics turn up whether you want them or not. I will admit, when I was a real little kid, I didn't thrill over the Uncle Scrooge comics too much. I thought the stories were too long and drawn out. Maybe it's a part of growing up, but I like them a great deal nowadays. Surprisingly, I didn't get too many issues in this set. Only 3. I think the Uncle Scrooge comics had a very wide and varied supporting cast, and the stories were always pretty clever. They didn't just go for the gags, which I normally still prefer, but they're humorous in their own way. The Uncle Scrooge comics, if you didn't know, laid the groundwork for the DuckTales cartoon show in the 1980s. A lot of what's in DuckTales is simply revisiting the Uncle Scrooge comics, but you don't see much of Donald Duck in those cartoons. The final 2 Disney comics I wanted to show you come from the Gold Key publisher that later morphed into the Whitman publisher. From 1962 to 1984, they took over the Disney comics from Dell. There were a lot of interesting series during this period, including Daisy and Donald and Super Goof. I always thought Daisy Duck was a good character, so putting her and Donald in a title together just seemed appropriate. Super Goof was a superhero spoof featuring Goofy as the title character. How his identity was a secret is anybody's guess. Amazingly, this concept worked well, and the series never got stale. There could easily be Super Goof comics and regular Goofy comics. Super Goof has been revived a number of times over the years. Before I get to the war comics, I wanted to show off some of the funny kid comics. First up is Little Lulu. There is 1 from Dell and 2 from Whitman. The Dell comic was a special called Little Lulu and Tubby in Australia. It's a shame that the front cover is in such rough shape, but the Lulu comics are so funny I couldn't refuse. Little Lulu comics were published regularly for decades. I have many of them, and although nothing changes much in Lulu's world, the comics never get old, and I don't get tired of reading them. I think, for the most part, Little Lulu comics could be made the same today, and kids would still love them. She's timeless. The same can be said for Dennis the Menace. After Fawcett was forced into canceling their super popular superhero, Captain Marvel, in the early 1950s, Dennis the Menace sort of became that publisher's next big star. Of course, he started life as a newspaper comic, but Dennis the Menace became a multimedia success in comic books, television, and, much later, cartoons, movies, and as the longtime mascot for Dairy Queen. I got 3 issues in this lot. Dennis the Menace, in the comic books, isn't much different than the comic strips, although he is less feisty. If you read the comic strips, Dennis can be kind of a vicious little brat sometimes. He can be that way in the comic books too, but he's often a bit more thoughtful and unintentionally menacing. It works better that way to get more interesting stories. I thought the comic books were just as funny and charming as the newspaper strips. The tone of the comic books is what they went with when they did the popular cartoon show in the 1980s. Gold Key, or Whitman, depending on how you look at it, came up with their own unique comic book character with Wacky Witch. She wasn't a kid, although she was drawn to look small like a child, and the comics were aimed at younger readers. I like this title. I don't think it became as popular as they wanted it to be, but it deserved to be noticed. It was like their equivalent of a Harvey Comics title. Harvey excelled with titles like Casper the Friendly Ghost, Wendy the Good Little Witch, Hot Stuff the Little Devil, and many others that made supernatural characters all cute and friendly. Wacky Witch wasn't a ripoff of any of these titles, as she had her own unique design and premise, but the tone was in keeping with Harvey. Well done. Last, and maybe least, are the war comics I got in this lot. I'll be honest with you, I really don't like war comics that much. There are some that have been made that are kind of fun and interesting, but most of them are boring and terrible. That's kind of what war is in the first place, boring and terrible. Don't believe me? Watch anything ever done about the Vietnam War, ever. I love the 60s, but Vietnam War dramas? Before Marvel became Marvel, they went through some other names. Most popularly, the company was called Timely. Then, towards the end of the Golden Age, it became Atlas. For a very short period of time, from about 1959 to 60, they used the name of Male Publishing, M-A-L-E. That's where this war comic, Battle number 69, comes from. The best thing about it is the Jack Kirby art on the cover. Jack Kirby also did some of the art inside the book. Here's a Dell war comic called Combat, talking about Pearl Harbor. Charlton certainly wasn't short on war titles. I got Fightin' Air Force, Fightin' Marines, and 2 issues of U.S. Air Force. DC was downright legendary for their war comics. Now, DC actually did have some interesting war comics here and there. I love the offbeat things, like the Haunted Tank and the Unknown Soldier. I didn't get those in this lot, but I did get an issue of All-American Men of War, two issues of GI Combat, 2 issues of Our Army at War featuring Sergeant Rock. Now, to a degree, I do like the Sergeant Rock character. I'm not altogether enchanted with his comics. I mean, some of them are okay. I love the name of the character. I think the Sergeant Rock name is cool. And Easy Company, I think that's kind of cool. He might translate well into like an action movie, maybe. As long as they don't make it too much like a boring war movie. If they let it be more of like an action film than a war drama, I think it could be pretty good. And I also got 2 issues of Star-Spangled War Stories. One of the Star-Spangled War Stories features the popular character of Mademoiselle Marie in only her 2nd appearance. She is a member of the French Resistance during World War II and is notable for being the only love interest of Sergeant Rock. I do like this character. I've come across her in other comic books, and I do think that she's interesting. I got a lot of unique finds in this grouping of classic comics, and I'm very happy to roll them into my personal
Comic Kingdom.